Again.
Good evening. On behalf of the Hellenic Scientists Association, I'd like to welcome you here tonight. We hope that you'll have a stimulating and enlightening evening. Our moderator this evening is Professor Roger Fisher. Professor Fisher is Samuel Williston Professor of Law Emeritus at the Harvard Law School. He is also director of the program on negotiations at Harvard Law. Professor Fisher has published extensively on negotiations. His most well-known book is Getting to Yes. Professor Fisher.
Thank you very much. Our subject this evening is the U.S. challenges in the Southern Balkans and how best to avoid conflict in Kosovo and the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. We know that war is raging in Bosnia, and it's been very hard to stop. We're looking ahead to Southern Balkans and considering how armed conflict might be best avoided there. There are two general subjects when you say, how do we solve this problem? One is, what's the right answer? And the second one is, how do we deal with the fact that different people have different answers, and that my answer may not be the one that everybody else adopts? There's no shortage of answers in the Balkans. The problem is that different people have different answers, and they're pursuing them by bellicose means. So we will be looking very much at what are some ideas about this and what can be done. We will, to have some, there's no way in any one program where we can have all the Balkan voices on the platform unless it went on a very long time. There are lots of ideas. There will be more programs, more ideas. But our principal speaker and I thought it would be a good idea to have another, at least one other voice, and so we've asked one of our Neiman Fellows to be available to comment briefly and make a few comments, questions after our principal primary speaker who will lead off with his opening discussion. He will speak for about 34 minutes, right? Shoot for 30 with a 5-minute margin in reserve if he wants. Then we'll have 5 or 10 minutes of a voice from Albanian colleague. Then we'll open up to your questions and comments, which I will try to moderate. Our principal speaker was born in Greece. He emigrated to Massachusetts at the age of 10 and been based in Worcester off and on most of his life. Graduate of Boston University and the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. He's worked for Boston Herald Traveler, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. He's also a book writer, a film producer. Part 3 of The Godfather he produced just to get some flavor of the variety of his activities. His book, Eleni, published 10 years ago to great acclaim, has been translated into more than a dozen languages, and it too was made into a movie, a Warner Brothers film. 87, he published a sequel, Elas, following on what happened after the first book. It's a pleasure to introduce to you Nicholas Gage. Mr. Gage?
Thank you very much. When I first came to the United States, on the boat over, I learned a few words in English and how to count in English. And when I went to the first school in Worcester, Massachusetts, my father said, when we go into the principal's office and I give you a signal, stand up and recite what you know. So we went to the principal's office, and my father sat next to the principal. I was by the door, and every time he'd look at me, I'd jump up and stuck on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and said every word I knew in English. And he would always stop me. Anyway, I thought I'd really made a big impression on the principal, because when we got to the schoolroom, I saw that all the kids were much older than I was, and I thought they had really put me in advanced grade. But as after the principal left and the teacher clapped their hands and the kids went up to the school, I saw that they had difficulty writing even the smallest words, and I realized they had put me in a class for retarded children. And I turned to my sister and I said in Greek, Fotini, these kids don't seem normal to me. And she said, of course normal, they're not normal, they're Americans. Anyway, I don't want to start off by insulting any ethnic group here, particularly Americans, but since then I've learned not to talk fast because it could get me into serious trouble. So I'm going to try to maintain the 30 minutes, but if I go over, it's because of learned experience. For the first quarter of this century, the Balkans were known as history's cauldron, a place where various ethnic groups battled each other for territory in which they could define their national identities that had been blurred during centuries of Ottoman occupation. The borders that emerged at the end of the Balkan Wars and after World War I did not satisfy anyone in the region, but the territorial ambitions of the various countries were submerged first by the struggle against fascism and then by the long Cold War. When communism collapsed, however, ethnic hostilities ignited once more and the dormant territorial ambitions resurfaced. Open war broke out in the northern part of former Yugoslavia, and everyday newspapers and news programs described the terrible bloodshed that has resulted. Could all this bloodletting have been prevented? No one can say for certain, but what we do know is that at least 2 years before the conflict erupted, the CIA published a report saying that Yugoslavia would unravel and several of its countries would most likely wind up fighting each other. Despite this advance warning and the warning from other research and intelligence agencies, neither Europe nor the United States developed a clear, effective policy to respond to the breakup of Yugoslavia and avert, or at least limit, hostilities in the region. Instead of taking effective action that might have saved lives, they basically reacted to developments as they happened. But hostilities erupted so quickly and so violently that it became impossible even to try to contain them without committing a large number of European and American troops that would create even greater carnage and lead to a cost of many American and European lives. So basically, Europe and the United States have stayed on the sidelines and have done very little, at least so far. It is very easy, of course, to criticize in hindsight, but it is pointless, and I'm not going to waste time spreading blame because there's enough for all of us to share. But it is important to learn from our failures to prevent conflict in the northern Yugoslav republics and do everything possible to avoid it from erupting in the rest of the Balkans. I'm going to focus on two areas: the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia and Kosovo, where American foreign policy must focus with much greater intensity than it did in northern Yugoslavia if conflict in the southern Balkans is to be prevented. A more effective foreign policy is going to require greater understanding of the historical and current differences that threaten stability in the area. So we'll go into some detail about both these regions and begin with the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. The crucial issue here is the desire for recognition of a part of Yugoslavia that was known as the administrative region of Vardar Banovina until it was named the People's Republic of Macedonia in 1945. The person who gave the region its new name was Marshal Tito, and the reason he did so was to use it as a nucleus for the annexation of those parts of Bulgaria and Greece that once the Macedonia of Alexander the Great. You may remember that Tito, with Stalin's help, forced the Bulgarian government in 1947 to agree to cede Bulgarian Macedonia to Yugoslavia. You may also recall that Tito also tried to grab Greek American provinces by persuading Greek communist forces in the late 1940s to promise him those areas in exchange for supporting their insurrection in Greece. Fortunately, both plans failed. When Tito broke with Stalin in 1948, Bulgaria broke the agreement to cede its Macedonian provinces and indeed assumed an aggressive posture toward Macedonian areas in Yugoslavia. As for Greece, the defeat of the communist insurrection in 1949 ended the threat of annexation of Greek Macedonia. I have gone into a brief historical review to remind you that the reinvention of Vada Banovina as the Republic of Macedonia is very recent from a historical perspective, was accomplished specifically to advance territorial ambitions, and in the case of Greece, to do so by promoting armed conflict. As a result of that conflict, more than 120,000 Greeks lost their lives, more than 685,000 were left homeless. Vast areas of the country were devastated, and Greece's post-war development was delayed at least 5 years compared to the rest of Europe, a delay that Greece is still trying to make up. The name Republic of Macedonia, therefore, is not a phantom fear for Greeks. It is associated with immense pain and suffering by the Greek people and linked with a deliberate plan to take over parts of Greek territory that have had a Greek identity for more than 3,000 years. Now, you may say, yes, all that was unfortunate, but these are different times and circumstances, and Greeks should learn to move on. I think Greeks could put it all behind them, and would if the territorial ambitions Tito set in motion in 1945 ended with the Greek Civil War, or even with the end of the Cold War more recently, but they have not. For all of the 48 years since Tito created the People's Socialist Republic of Macedonia, its leaders have never stopped trying to undermine Greek sovereignty over Greek Macedonia, which they call Aegean Macedonia, and portray as occupied territory that one day will be, quote, liberated, unquote. During the same period, they published and circulated throughout the region and abroad countless books, articles, and pamphlets that identify large areas of Greece as part of Great Macedonia, and listing Thessaloniki, the second largest city in Greece, as its future capital. Only 2 years ago, the President of the Republic, Kiro Grigorov, gave an interview to a Yugoslav magazine in which he spoke of subjugated Macedonians in Greece, Serbia, and Bulgaria, and acknowledged that leading parties in the Republic vow that, quote, Macedonian power will redraw the borders of Greece and Serbia, end of quote. Now, as they pursue recognition, the leaders of the Republic ridicule the concerns such efforts have caused in Greece by asking how a country of 10 million people that is a member of both NATO and the EEC could fear a small, weak state of 2.5 million. I don't think Greeks fear Macedonia as a state, but they know that if it is given recognition on its own terms, it will be encouraged to pursue its misguided ambitions at every opportunity, and it will create great instability in the Southern Balkans in the future. They know, too, that if Greece does not recognize and support its independence, and this they cannot do until it follows the example of other communist states like Russia and completely abandons its past, the Republic will become a tempting target for other countries in the region. That will bring the kind of conflict to the Balkans that we haven't seen in decades. Greece has stated that it is not against the recognition of independent state to replace the former Socialist Republic of Macedonia. Since Yugoslavia has unraveled, Greeks recognize that it is to their interest to have a small but truly independent state as a neighbor rather than a big and powerful one. Greece, however, strongly opposed a rush to recognition with the potential to trigger open clashes among the various ethnic groups in the small mosaic of a state, and to revive old territorial ambitions that are certain to send the Southern Balkans to the violent conflicts of the past. Independence without the joint guarantee of all its neighbors, especially Greece, will put Skopje at risk of falling either into the embrace of Bulgaria, which has always coveted the region and considers most of its people Bulgarians, or under the dominance of its powerful northern neighbor Serbia, as many in the Republic fear. If either happens, Greece cannot remain indifferent and stability in the Balkans will become a memory. The only way to a clear, safe path to recognition for the Republic is through the procedures being pursued by the United Nations that call for changes in the Republic's constitution, confidence-building measures, and most of all, a name that is acceptable to both countries. Let us look at how the Republic and its leaders have responded to these requirements so far. For the past 2 years, Skopje has launched a well-financed, carefully orchestrated campaign in Europe and the United States to portray itself as a peaceful, democratic, unarmed state with neither the power nor the desire to threaten any of its neighbors. Their president has traveled to most of the major capitals to give his personal assurances of the Republic's good intentions, and its parliament has passed 2 amendments to the Constitution that it says give legal binding to these assurances. But both the statements and the amendments are only window dressing. The amendments, passed with the ease and speed of a simple government decree, do not alter the substance of the original articles or of the preamble. While new language has been added saying that the Republic will not interfere in the internal affairs of other states, it is meaningless because the Constitution leaves intact Article 49, which says that the state will, quote, take care of the status of the rights of the Macedonian people in neighboring countries, end of quote. What use can one expect that an ultranationalist party like the VMRO, which was identified as a terrorist organization in a recent NATO document, will make of that authority if it comes to power in the Republic? While you consider that, let me tell you that the VMRO currently has the largest number of seats in the Republic's parliament, and that its 1990 electoral platform declared that, quote, elements of the Macedonian nation which live under occupational rule of Greece, Bulgaria, and Albania are not an ethnic minority, but just occupied and enslaved parts of the Macedonian nation, end of quote. Even more telling than the articles in the Constitution is the fact that the preamble to the Republic has been left intact, and it is in preambles of constitutions that the philosophy of states is reflected. The preamble to Skopje's constitution states that among the principles on which the new republic will be built are the, quote, legal traditions of the Khrushchev Republic and the historical decisions of the Anti-Fascist Assembly of the People's Liberation of Macedonia, end of quote. Both the Khrushchev Republic of 1903 and the Anti-Fascist Assembly held by Tito in 1944 proclaimed expansionist goals best reflected in the Assembly's declarations calling for unification of the Greek and Bulgarian provinces with the People's Republic of Macedonia. In view of the intentions embodied both in the preamble and in the articles of the Republic's constitution, you can see why Greeks don't feel reassured by the amendments enacted by Skopje's government to enhance its chances for recognition, and why they do not constitute guarantees against territorial claims as both the United States and the EEC have asked. As for the confidence-building measures, so far there have not been many from Skopje's side. On the contrary, organizations with strong ties to the Republic's political leadership have been mobilized both at home and abroad to intensify hostile propaganda against Greece. I'll cite 2 examples only, although I can cite dozens. On January 15, 1992, a publishing firm with government ties issued a set of souvenir banknotes with the most famous landmark of Thessaloniki, the White Tower, pictured on the note. Indeed, Thessaloniki, Greece's second largest city, is shown with a Slavic name, Solun. Even worse, the government of Skopje took the Star of Regina, which was discovered in a Macedonian tomb just 20 miles from Thessaloniki, and put it on its flag as its national symbol. If this republic has no claims on any Greek territory, why did it take as a symbol an artifact that was found on Greek territory and not on its own? This is the reason, by the way, that the flag of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia does not fly at the UN, the only flag that's missing from all those countries that have been recognized so far, because this is a bone of contention in the current negotiations. It is obvious then that the hostile propaganda, both mild and severe, continues unabated against Greece, and it is organized and directed at the capital of the Republic in Skopje. The aim of this propaganda is to spread false information about the ethnological composition of Greek Macedonia, to dispute the Greek heritage of Macedonia, and to usurp the Macedonian name in order to justify claims on Greek Macedonia. We now come to the name itself. The denomination Republic of Macedonia is obviously unacceptable to Greeks because it implies territorial claims proclaimed by Skopje 48 years ago for the express purpose of taking over parts of Greece. Equally important, the name implies not only territorial claims, but represents an assault on Greece's cultural heritage. The culture and history of Macedonia is part of the Greek heritage and has no connection to the people who now want to call themselves the Republic of Macedonia. As Konstantin Karamanlis, the president of Greece, who is himself a Macedonian, wrote in a letter to German Chancellor Helmut Kohl, Skopje has, quote, absolutely no right, either historic or ethnic, to use the name Macedonia. No historical right, because the Slavs, who make up the majority of the Republic's present population, first appeared in the history of the region in the 6th century AD. That is, some 1,000 years after the period when Alexander the Great established Macedonia as a significant part of the Greek world. And no ethnic right, because the present population of this republic is made up of Slavs, Albanians, Gypsies, and other ethnic groups, all of them respected, of course, but none with any connection to Macedonians, end of quote. Despite the lack of any real ethnic or cultural tie between the present republic and ancient Macedonia, their leaders, by using its name over the past 48 years, have been able to foster the impression that they are the natural inheritors of Philip and Alexander and the land that they once ruled. That, of course, is as preposterous as if the people of Tunisia decided to call their country Carthage because they occupy a part of that ancient empire, to claim Hannibal as their ancestor, and to imply that all the land he once ruled is rightfully theirs. While the Republic's claim to links with ancient Macedonia is insupportable and its ambitions to expand its territory is unjustifiable, there is ample evidence, including the statements I have cited, that these delusions are deeply embedded in the long-term policies of Skopje. These policies will not be abandoned if Skopje is given unconditional recognition, even though some of its leaders are now disclaiming a connection to ancient Macedonia to increase the chances of winning recognition. There is no other conclusion to reach if the Republic's leaders insist on calling their state Macedonia, since it is a name which they have no connection and was imposed as a vehicle to promote expansion into the territory of neighboring countries. Greeks point out that Russia stopped calling itself the Soviet Union when it abandoned its expansionist past. Why does Skopje insist on keeping a name associated with expansionist ambitions in the Balkans unless it still harbors those aims, they ask. The territory of the Republic extends over 39% of the geographic region of ancient Macedonia, while Greek Macedonia covers 51% and Bulgarian 9%. If the name of a geographic region is allowed to be monopolized by a political entity which controls only 39% of the territory, the door will be left open for claims in perpetuity for the remaining 61%. This is not scare talk for Greeks. The whole existence of the so-called Macedonian Republic since its creation by Tito is based on that assumption. Once recognition is assured, national forces in the Republic will use the name as a strong weapon for cultural and territorial aggression. While they will be hurling a powerful slogan, "Free Macedonia," against Greece, Greeks will be left with the impossible task of trying to explain subtle nuances about the history of the region over the past 3,000 years. For Greeks, the case is clear. If the root of the problem, that is the name, is not removed, they will all come to regret it. I don't think Greeks are being alarmist or reacting any differently than any other countries might. In fact, we have a recent example showing that Northern Europeans are just as sensitive about such issues. In October of 1991, the Republic of Slovenia published a banknote bearing a watermark of the historical symbol of the old Principality of Carinthia. Although it was a temporary banknote, its printing raised a stormy reaction among Carinthian Austrians who accused Slovenia of fueling nationalistic claims for Carinthia. After a heated debate in the local parliament, the federal government in Vienna was asked to intervene with Slovenian authorities who finally gave assurances that they had no claims on the province and agreed to substitute the banknote. I don't need to draw parallels, but if Austrians reacted as they did about a watermark, you can imagine Greek sensitivity after having been subjected to 48 years of provocations. The fact is that the end of the Cold War has unleashed nationalistic forces that are capable of creating hostility and conflict anywhere in the world. The Balkans are particularly vulnerable as borders fixed after World War I and II have never been fully accepted by the countries involved. To create a new nation called Macedonia in the Balkans is the surest way to revive all these conflicting claims and to sow hostility in a region that is certain to reap a whirlwind of trouble in the future. The United States has a unique opportunity to prevent conflict in the Southern Balkans now and in the future by working closely with the United Nations to make sure that the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia removes territorial claims on its neighbors from its constitution, ends hostile provocations against Greece, and accepts a name that reflects its own culture and history, not someone else's. As President Clinton stated in August of 1992, quote, "If the southernmost former Yugoslav Republic wishes to receive American recognition, it must first accept the principle of the Helsinki Final Act, satisfy its neighbors and the world community that its intentions are peaceful, and abide by the European community's decision which rejects the use of the name Macedonia," end of quote. The Clinton administration, with a modest diplomatic investment, has a chance to further exercise its positive leadership and demonstrate its commitment to peaceful resolution of Balkan disputes. By actively supporting all aspects of the Security Council resolution, the United States can prevent conflict and facilitate a just, long-lasting solution that is politically acceptable to all sides and which provides for a productive model for the other outstanding issues and crises in the Balkans. The second major flashpoint in the Southern Balkans is Kosovo, the southwestern part of Serbia, which is overwhelmingly populated by Albanians. If Kosovo explodes, it is likely to draw not only Albania into the conflict, but the major powers in the region, Greece and Turkey, historical adversaries and uneasy allies in NATO. As I wrote in a Washington Post article a month ago, right now Kosovo is a political powder keg ready for the slightest spark. The Serbs are keeping the lid on through martial law, waiting for the fighting in Bosnia to end before moving to reduce the Muslim population by pushing hundreds of thousands of them across the border into Albania. At the same time, Kosovo Albanians are quietly amassing arms, waiting for the right chance to strike out against the Serbs. So far, the United States has responded to this volatile threat of combustion in the Balkans by warning the Serbs that we will intervene militarily if they move against the Albanian population in Kosovo. We have not issued such a warning about any other part of Yugoslavia. So the threat makes it clear how concerned Washington is about Kosovo. But the warning made both by the Bush and Clinton administrations may actually encourage conflict in Kosovo rather than prevent it. While it may restrain the Serbs, it may encourage Albanians in Kosovo to revolt because they feel the Americans would come to their rescue and help them win independence, or their ultimate goal, union with Albania. The Albanian government in Tirana has fed such ambitions by calling for Kosovo's independence and emphasizing the unity of all Albanians in the region. Behind such encouragement is the dream of absorbing a part of Serbia that is much more developed than Albania itself, and the hope of resettling the southern part of Albania, called Northern Epirus, in order to push out the ethnic Greeks who live there and want their own independence. But such a move by Tirana would compel Greece to intervene to protect the Greek population in Northern Epirus, which in turn would probably cause the Turks to rush to the support of their fellow Muslims in Albania, and the whole Balkans would explode into war. Before I suggest how such a disaster might be avoided, let me briefly explain why the regions where the conflict might start, Kosovo and Northern Epirus, are so volatile. Like Macedonia, the region of Northern Epirus has had a Greek identity for some 3,000 years, but was arbitrarily given to Albania when the nation was formed in 1913 at the insistence of Italy and Austria to protect their control of the Adriatic Sea. Northern Epirus, an area about the size of Delaware, faces the extreme heel of Italy. It is just below the narrowest point in the neck of the Adriatic, and forms the crucial gateway to the Western Balkans. Impartial historians have never disputed the fact that the people of Northern Epirus belonged to a region whose language and culture were Greek long before Alexander the Great's mother was born there in the 4th century BC. From ancient times until the beginning of this century, Epirus was viewed as a single region, from the Aquasaranian mountains in the north to the Ambracian Gulf in the south. This is true whether it was a Hellenic kingdom under Pyrrhus, a Roman province, an independent principality in Byzantine times, or an Ottoman district under Ali Pasha. Although occupied for long periods by Romans, Slavs, Franks, and Ottoman Turks, the population of the whole region remained primarily Greek. This fact is acknowledged even by the founder of modern Albania, Ismail Kemal, who wrote a letter on January 22, 1907 to the Prime Minister of Greece stipulating that the natural border of Albania and Greece should run from the city of Monastir, in what is now the former Republic of Macedonia, to quote, a point on the seaboard to the north of Corfu, which encompasses all of northern Epirus. South of that line, Kemal conceded, quote, a majority of the inhabitants is by language and national sentiment Greek, and north of it, the majority is by the same standards Albanian, end of quote. It is no wonder then that when the people of northern Epirus woke up one day and found themselves to be part of Albania and not Greece as they expected in 1913, they revolted and declared their independence. They were persuaded to accept being reattached to Albania after they were guaranteed complete administrative autonomy by the Protocol of Corfu of 1914, which was signed by representatives of the Albanian government. That status was affirmed by a declaration of Albania to the League of Nations, which the Permanent Court of International Justice has declared is a binding obligation of Albania. As a result, the people of northern Epirus are the only minority in the Balkans whose right to autonomy is guaranteed by treaty and affirmed by international law, a ruling that has been used as a precedent for claims to autonomous status by other ethnic minorities. But Albania has never implemented its obligations to northern Epirus. Instead, it tried to erase the ethnic identity of its Greek population with such brutal methods that in 1946 the U.S. Senate passed a resolution unanimously calling for the region to be ceded to Greece. All such efforts were blocked by the Soviet Union, however, both at the Paris Peace Conference and later at the United Nations. The persecution of the Greeks in northern Epirus reached unimaginable levels during the long communist rule of Albania by the brutal dictator Enver Hoxha. For more than 4 decades, they were uprooted from their homes by the thousands and scattered to the northern regions of Albania, where they were completely cut off from their fellow Greeks. Thousands more were executed, and tens of thousands were sentenced to long prison terms at hard labor for expressing any loyalty to their Hellenic traditions. They were forced to change their names, renounce their ethnic identity, and deny their religious beliefs. Everyone hoped that when communism finally collapsed in Albania and a new, ostensibly democratic government was elected in the spring of 1992, these abuses would end and the full rights of the Greek minority would be restored. But the new government in Tirana has continued the oppressive policies of the past against the Greek minority, and a new Albanian chauvinism is being promoted that threatens the very existence of the Greek minority in the country. Today in Albania, the opening of Greek schools is forbidden. It is allowed only in a few districts and only in the primary grades. The minority's political organization, Omonia, is prohibited from fielding candidates in elections, and gangs of youths harass ethnic Greeks to force them to flee south to Greece while security officials look the other way. As a result of these policies and hardships, more than 100,000 Epirotes have sought temporary refuge in Greece, and many others have joined relatives in the United States, Europe, and Australia. These twin forces, persecution at home and the promise of a better life abroad, threaten to erase forever the Hellenic culture of northern Epirus, which has survived ever since the region became part of the Greek world in ancient times. I won't deal here with the grievances of the Albanian population of Kosovo because I'm sure Mr. Kalamata will go into that. But I feel it's important to know why Kosovo is so important to the Serbs. As Robert Kaplan explains in his book, Balkan Ghosts, Kosovo was the center of the Nemanjic dynasty, founded toward the end of the 12th century by a tribal chieftain, Stefan Nemanja, who carved out the first Serbian state. Stefan Nemanja's son, the traveling monk known as Saint Sava, founded and organized the Serbian Orthodox Church. A later descendant of Stefan, King Milutin, expanded Serbia into a great Orthodox Christian empire at the beginning of the 14th century, richer even than the Byzantine Empire at the time. Kosovo is also the place where the Serbs suffered the defeat that sent them into 500 years of Turkish occupation on June 28, 1389. John Reed, writing during the First Balkan War, noted, quote, "Every Serbian peasant soldier knows what he's fighting for. When he was a baby, his mother greeted him, 'Hail, little avenger of Kosovo,'" end of quote. Kosovo, Robert Kaplan writes, is, quote, "the Judea and Samaria of the Serbian national consciousness, the place where it all happened, where the great Nemanja kingdom was born, grew to greatness, and was destroyed. In recent decades, however, this hallowed ground has been demographically reclaimed, not by the Turks, but by their historical appendants, the Muslim Albanians," end of quote. In 1987, the present Serbian leader, Slobodan Milosevic, came to the region on June 28th anniversary of Serbian defeat by the Turks almost 600 years earlier, pointed to the general area of the battlefield and reportedly vowed, quote, "They'll never do this to you again. Never again will anyone defeat you," end of quote. As I said, both the United States and the Europeans have warned the Serbs that if they move against the Albanians in Kosovo, it will result in military intervention. But warning only one side not to take action in Kosovo will not only fail to avert conflict in the area, but may actually ensure that hostilities would break out throughout the region, because the Albanian population may feel that protection from the Americans is a good way to win their independence and start the trouble. What is needed is not warnings whose consequences have not been thought out, but an effective policy that will restrain the ethnic ambitions of all the parties in the Southern Balkans. The key to such a policy, in my view, is for the American government to call for parallel status for Kosovo and Northern Cyprus, and to insist that rights granted to one will go to the other. If that is done, the Albanians will be moved to scale back their demands for Kosovo, because they will have to give the same rights to the Greeks of Northern Cyprus. At the same time, the Serbs could not refuse to grant a political settlement to Albanian Muslims in Kosovo if it is also offered to their fellow Orthodox Christians in Northern Cyprus. That status should not offer the minorities the means to unite with the adjacent countries, Albania and Greece, because any alteration of borders in the Balkans would create havoc throughout the region for many years to come. What will work best is a form of autonomy that will give both minorities the power to develop their own cultural, educational, and religious institutions as they wish, but still keep them within existing borders. But any plan that is unfair and unbalanced, that ignores the realities of the region and tries to address the grievances of the Albanian minority in Serbia while ignoring the Greek minority in Albania, is doomed to failure. Indeed, it would ignite all of the Balkans at the close of this century into the kind of conflagration that devastated the region at the beginning of it. All the states of the former Yugoslavia, except for Slovenia, have large ethnic minorities, as do most of the other countries in the Balkans, Central Asia, and the former Soviet Union. In Georgia alone, the two separate groups are battling the central government for self-determination. Similar conflicts are certain to break out in many other countries unless a way is found to satisfy the aspirations of minorities without threatening the sovereignty of the states in which they live. Kosovo and Northern Cyprus offer an ideal opportunity for the international community led by the United States to forge a model for that kind of autonomy. If such a model had existed 3 years ago, perhaps the bloodbath in the Northern Balkans might have been avoided. It is worth noting that even the political leaders of Slovenia were willing to remain in the Yugoslav Federation if their calls for autonomy had been met. The United States must take the lead in convincing countries with strong ethnic minorities that autonomy is not a threat, but an opportunity. The place to begin is the Southern Balkans. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicholas Gage. Before opening up to general conversation, just questions from you, we've asked our Nieman Fellow from Albania to give us a somewhat different point of view, I trust, on some of the Albanian points. A commentator was born in Albania, graduated from Toronto University in history and philology in '82, journalist and editor with the weekly magazine called Drita, or The Light, published by the Union of Writers and Artists of Albania. He's ex-chairman of the Independent League of Journalists of Albania. He's been here during the academic year as a Nieman Fellow. Arban Kalamata, would you take a few minutes?
Thank you. Well, Balkan is a real mess, and I feel a tendency to contradict Mr. Cage in every word, but don't be afraid, I won't do this. It will take me too long. Well, as a matter of fact, I am not prepared to speak. I am not well prepared to speak today, because I was told only today that I'll take part in that discussion. And I have had a few notes here and during Mr. Gage's speech, so I'll try to do my best. Yesterday, I incidentally met a Greek young man. I was waiting at my doctor when the receptionist announced my name, which, as you might see, is Kalamata. And he was sitting next to me, and he said, "Oh, you are Greek?" No, I said, "I'm not Greek." I was a little bit nervous, because I become nervous when they call me Greek, to tell you the truth. And what are you then? Because Kalamata is a city in Greece, he said. Yes, I know. I was going to tell him that I told him that I was from Albania, and I was going to tell him that I have traced my name back some 500 years in a document that King of Naples sent Skanderbeg. And I have traced it as an Albanian name. By the way, the name has a meaning in Albanian as well as in Greek. And I was going to tell him all these things when I saw that I needn't do this, because he was getting his wallet from his pocket, and from them he showed me a small picture of a boy, of a young man in his age. "Do you know him?" He said. "He's Albanian. I've worked with him in Greece for a long time, and he's like a brother to me." Well, I thought that I didn't need to go with explanation of differences with nationalities and so on, when I saw how an Albanian and a Greek were like brothers. And he kept the picture of an Albanian in his wallet when not many things can be kept. I'll express here only my view, because I'm a journalist and I don't have the same view as my government or as any other government, so I think you should understand and take all my words as my only view. This boy, as I understood, was not educated in any university. And I think he had escaped the patriotic or chauvinistic brainwashing that is now, or I think for a long time, boiling into Balkans. I think that the tragedy of the region, the present tragedy of the region, is that science, education, philosophy, the so-called history, archaeology, literature, poetry, all these are being used to serve politics. I think that the tragedy is that the Serbian Academy of Science produces such an infamous document, unprecedented in the civilized world, as the expulsion of the Albanians from Kosovo, where ethnic cleansing, deprivation, humiliation, imprisonment, torturing and killing, yes, large-scale killing, is cold-bloodedly planned by so-called scientists. It is this notorious Academy of Anti-Science that has created the myth of the birthplace of Serbia and cautiously infringed it in the minds of every Serbian, as well as a lot of other nationalistic lies. But the tragedy is also that there are others around the region, that there are even writers, artists, sculptors who are serving the interests of that political group or the other. And I'm afraid to say that you can find them even in this country. All this happens because those in power do not serve people, they use people. People don't want to fight each other. Go and ask a Bosnian Serb, a Bosnian Muslim, a Bosnian Croat, a Greek, an Albanian, but ask people, not politicians. People want to have pictures of their friends in their wallet. Why do we have to sell them all sorts of lies? Why do we invent all sorts of conflicts? Why do we have to ask the autonomy of 60,000 Greeks living in Albania when they enjoy every human right? When they have 13 chairmen of communes elected, 32 councillors in the city hall councils, and 33 district councils. When the chairman of the districts of Gjirokastra, Saranda, and Elvina, and the mayor of Saranda are Greeks. Where in the Albanian parliament, 2 seats belong to the Human Rights Party, which is a Greek party. When 2 ministers, 1 ambassador of the present Albanian government are Greeks. I don't think that you can extinguish a fire by pouring fuel into it. Instead of this, I think that the mission of such forums as this, the mission of every intelligent human being, the mission of every educated man is to convince those in power how to help people live peacefully with one another and how to serve people. The mission is to find ways of helping people decide for their fate and not telling them what to do so that they can serve politicians. Can we do that? Can we open the shut down University of Pristina? Can we open the shut down Albanian schools in Kosovo? Can we bring back to work all the doctors, engineers, workers, and restore life in the paralyzed and military occupied country? Can we reopen the radio and TV of Pristina? Can we restore civilization in a place where it's forcefully destroyed? Yes, I think we can. But we should first stop serving politicians. We should begin calling each other man or woman, human beings, and not Muslims, Christians, Orthodox, Catholics, Jews, blacks, whites, Buddhists, or whatever it is. 20% of the population in Albania are Orthodox Christians, but they are Albanian, as well as Catholic Germans, Catholic Spanish, Catholic Portuguese, are Germans, Spanish, and Portuguese, and not Italians. The population of Kosovo is 90% Albanians, not Muslims, Muslim Albanians. I have never read in this country newspapers anything like the Protestant or Catholic or whatever he is, President Bill Clinton. But I cannot explain the stupidity of the ill-intentioned phrase, the 40-year-old Muslim cardiologist who is now the president of Albania. And I can't explain the absurdity of inventing new geographical expressions. South Albania is South Albania. It's not Northern Epirus, Northern Greece, or anything northern. The number of Greeks who have come to work there in the last century and settled because they found suitable conditions is no more than 60,000. All the others, about 1.5 million, are Albanians of different religion. Those of them who are Orthodox Christians have their own archdiocese. We have 3 priests, 3 Albanian Orthodox Christian priests here in this hall today. And they do their prayers in their mother tongues, in Albanian. To ask an autonomous region for the part of Albania is the same as to ask, I think, an autonomous region for maybe 100,000 Greeks who live in Boston. Thank you.
Do you want to make a quick comment from where you are?
Yes, I want to respond. The reason I think that people can act as human beings is because they do not see the problems of others as they see their own problems. You cannot have a double standard of asking for certain rights for one group because they're Albanians in Serbia, and not be willing to give the same rights to the same people because they happen to be ethnic Greeks. The number 60,000, by the way, is a lie.
You mean mistaken, perhaps?
No, it is a lie. It is an official number, and we don't have any other official number.
Okay, no, we can indicate where we disagree, but I'd really prefer you didn't call each other liars.
No, I didn't.
A lie is an intentional misstatement of fact, and mistaken, perhaps. Go ahead. Give us your view.
Well, there are more than 100,000 Greeks in Northern Epirotes in Greece at the moment, all whose names are available, and they came from this region within the last 2 years. Yet the Albanian government has been saying that there were 60,000 Greeks in Northern Epirotes for the past 50 years. Where did this 100,000 come from? In fact, the CIA yearbook of facts puts the Greek population of Albania at 8% of the total population, which would make it about 300,000. That's one point. The school. It is a shame that the University of Pristina is closed. It is a shame that the Greek University of Agorastro is also closed. It is a shame that Albanians are not given the right to practice, to go to school to learn the language. It is also a shame that Greeks are not given the same right in Northern Epirus. Last July, the people of the city of Himara voted 5,250 to be included in the ethnic districts. The government in Albania determines what is, if you're a Greek or not according to international rules that anyone can be whatever he says he wants to be, but the government tells you. And they have limited to 96 towns and villages in 2 districts. And when the people of Himara, who were taken out of these districts in 1946 because they did not support Enver Hoxha, voted in July 5,250 to be again considered part of the ethnic district, the government refused to allow it. The party, the Human Rights Party, which has two people in parliament, elected those two people in parliament, having been recognized on the last day before the elections, after the government of Albania passed a law saying that no...
Mr. Gage, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You had 40 minutes.
Okay, but I'm saying
And
that these
you
are
wanna
actual
make-
facts. That,
But let's look
I
at
will
what we
yield.
can do. You've suggested one point. Do you want to make a quick answer? I'd rather go to the audience and have questions.
No, I don't. I think that figures are very disputable, and then don't change my ideas.
Fine. Let's have questions. If you'd like to have questions or comments, come up to a microphone. Would you come down to the microphone so you can be heard? Would you come down to a microphone so I can hear you, sir? Yes, please.
Hi, could we please let Mr. Cage finish his answer? That's my question.
No, we have
That's my question, sir.
200 people here who have 30 minutes for questions. We're now debating facts. I don't want to debate whether it's 6%.
That is my
or 2%.
question to Mr. Gage. Can you please continue with what you were saying before,
No.
sir?
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Other comments or questions on how we should deal with this issue? One, we've heard that a way to do this is to prevent persuade the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia not to use the name Macedonia as it becomes independent. The other is a degree of autonomy in Kosovo for the minorities there. Are there other suggestions? Yes.
Hello, and thank you for coming. My name is Marko Simanovic. I'm a Canadian studying at the School of Public Health. I'm also actually of Croatian descent, and obviously very aware of what's going on.
Tip the microphones, we can all hear it just up a little bit. Thank you.
I just think that part of the whole problem with the Balkans is each peoples in the Balkans have failed to admit terrible tragedies that they have done. For example, what the Croatians did under the Ustaša regime. There's no excusing that, and yet you'll often find Croatians trying to defend it. I think we see the same thing with the Greek people and their treatment of the Macedonian question. There's no question that after the Balkan War, Macedonia was split up between Bulgaria, Serbia, and Greece. And it is almost embarrassing and very disappointing to see Greeks, educated Greeks and well-intentioned Greeks, going through incredible political and philosophical convolutions, historical convolutions, trying to explain that there was no Macedonia, that they don't deserve independence. What you are talking about, the autonomy for Greeks inside Albania, why does this not count for Macedonians inside Greece? I think that this is the root of the Balkan conflict, seeing each other as people and human beings and admitting our mistakes and moving forward.
what's your point? What's the question?
I take it the question is that using history for one answer rather than trying to understand if there's autonomy for Greeks in these other countries, should there be autonomy for Macedonians in northern Greece? How should we deal with?
My own position is that any large group of ethnic peoples who wants autonomy ought to have it. You know, be they Greeks in Albania, Albanians in Serbia, Croats in Slovenia, Slovenians in Croatia, Macedonians in Greece. I mean, anyone, if they ask for it, and there's a significant enough number to form a community, if it's an ethnic entity that is an established ethnic entity, I think that's the way to resolve these problems. Otherwise, they're going to be conflict forever in the Balkans and everywhere else.
There's a question some have as to whether or not you can resolve minority problems by geographical nice edges, because with the freedom to intermarry and marry and move and live different places, you will find people that don't fit in your autonomy region. But I don't want to debate the merits. I just
We're talking about current problems that could create a problem. What you're talking about is going to take many years and perhaps generations to accomplish.
No, but I said I don't think you can draw boundaries in the Balkans that will in fact be ethnically pure without a lot of violence pushing
but
people around.
you can hold a referendum and have the people decide.
And there'll be
And
disagreement about. Yes, please go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that there are about 400,000 Albanians now working in Greece. So. And they ask for an autonomy too.
The Albanians working in Greece are guest workers. They're not people who have lived in Greece for whose people have lived in Greece for 2,000, 3,000 years. You have traced your name as being Albanian. This would be difficult. I don't know how you did that because there was no Albanian written language until about 100 years ago. But I assume that you researched in Turkish records. But the fact is that the people in northern Epirus have lived there. You look at excavations, and what you dig up is all written in Greek. It's not written in Albanian or Serbian.
Okay, let's hear some more questions, please.
Yes, my name is Dimitrios Ioannidis, and I have a question to Mr. Kalamata. When he described the number and the character of Greek settlers in southern Albania or northern Epirus, he talked about that they migrated there in the 18th century. But he didn't tell us why Albanians live in the heartland of the Serbian kingdom. Do you know why they settled there?
I think that Albanians are at least some thousand years older there than Serbians there. It's a known fact that Slav tribes have come to the region at about 6th century, while Illyrian civilization is much older than that.
But
So next time, we got lots of people waiting. We got only a few minutes to go. I'm sorry. Yes, please, question here.
I'm Jerry Welch, neither Greek nor Albanian. But I'm actually very pleased to hear Mr. Gage state that he doesn't want to see any borders moved. But I fail to understand. I'd like for you to clarify what you mean by autonomy. What is the definition of autonomy? How far does that go?
Luckily, there is a treaty that was signed in Corfu in 1914 that by the people in northern Epirus, representatives of the people in northern Epirus, representatives of the Albanian government, representatives of the major powers. And this treaty states precisely that they are to have their own schools, their own churches, certain number of the positions in the public administration. They are to have in the armed forces. And this is very clearly defined. And as I say, this treaty was upheld by the League of Nations and was acknowledged as in 1934. The then Albanian government tried to close down the Greek schools, and the people there took the matter to the International Court of Justice, and the International Court of Justice said they had no right, because under this treaty, once you give a right to a region, you cannot take it back. So the autonomy is very clearly spelled out. All I'm asking is that a treaty that the Albania signed, that it finally, after almost 80 years, that it finally honors it. That's all I'm asking.
Would you?
Good. Let's not push. There are degrees of autonomy, and there.
How about flying a foreign flag in the country? Is it appropriate for every part of a country to have one flag?
I fly both the American and the Greek flag in my house in Massachusetts. You know, I see no, and in my house in Greece.
Please.
So, Mr. Kalamata, my name is Miltos Sarakinos, I am Greek. And now I presume, since you are here at Harvard, you are a journalist, you are, let's say, part of the elite of the Albanian society. And 2 or 3 years after the end of the Cold War and the fall of the communist regime, you come and you say the same things that for 45 years the communist regime was saying. dictating to people what they are. They are not Greek. They are Albanians of South. They are South Albanians. They are just Orthodox Christians. But the Serbs, the Albanians in Kosovo are Albanians, actually, and they are not Serbs, for example, Muslim Serbs. And coming and telling these things and saying that human rights are not violated in Albania, etc., etc. Let's go to Kosovo. And, okay, there are 90% Albanians, and their human rights are violated. And all the terrible things which you said are being planned, maybe being planned by the Serbs. But what guarantees to the 10% of the Serbs that Albanians will not do the same things to them if Kosovo shifts to the other side? I have read in all newspapers that Serbs themselves were prosecuted in Kosovo until 1987, when this region was autonomous. Can you please?
believe that?
Yes, absolutely I believe it. Absolutely. Because of all the things that has happened in Albania for 45 years and still happens, why should I not believe that?
Okay. The question of the Greek minority being ill-treated during the communist regime, yes, I agree with that. But it was treated, I think, fairly the same as all the Albanian people. Communism was a disease for all that region, and we suffered it the same with our Greek brothers in our borders. So we both suffered from communism. If there have been 100 or 1,000 of Greeks in prisons, there have been hundreds of thousands of Albanians in prisons. And I don't think that you can say that the Greek minority suffered more than the Albanian majority in Albania. And they had, I know for sure, not from the communist propaganda, but I know for sure that they had a newspaper like Ovima. My friends and colleagues worked there. They had hours in the radio station in the southern town of Gjirokastra, and they had schools and still have them. They have, as far as I know, at least 2 newspapers now, and they also have a program in the radio, and they have all the rights that the Albanian. If some of them have gone to Greece, it is for economical reasons. And many Albanians, I told you before, that 400,000 Albanians have fled to Greece. So they have gone to for economical reasons. And I don't think that they have gone to Greece for any discrimination, any kind of discrimination. As far as the Albanians of Kosovo concerned, I can say that they have always been treated as an occupied people by the Serbs there. There have been a period of a certain kind of liberalism or liberty, if we can call it, after the year 1968 in Kosovo, and up to 1981, in which the Kosovo people were allowed to have their university, their radio and TV program, and within this period, the Albanian culture in the region flourished with all its power, and they did very well. But as you know, they were all shut up by the Serbian regime.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to congratulate you, Mr. Gage, on being very provocative and contentious on this issue. You talk about a Greek minority, in southern Albania, or as
Could
you
I
call
have your
it,
name, please?
Father Michael Soter from the Albanian Orthodox Archdiocese in America. And yet, so what? What difference does it make? If they are Greek minorities, Romanian minorities, Albanian, Russians, or anything, they're all Albanian citizens, and they are able to participate fully in the life of the nation. They can become elected officers, they can own their own businesses, they can do this, they can fly their own flags, which they do. So I don't see what the problem is. If you're referring back to the regime of Enver Hoxha, everybody had problems, but so didn't everybody have problems with communism all over the world. Connected with this, I consider that you made a statement that I'd like you to verify. You said that the Tirana government, in some way, if something explodes in Kosovo, when all these Kosovo Albanians come to Albania, that the Tirana government's going to resettle them all into southern Albania so they can push out the ethnic Greeks, and that the Kosovars are amassing arms. I would like to know where you got this information. Thank you.
In terms of the resettlement, the resettling is already going on. I can give you towns and villages where Albanians from the north have been moved into Greek homes, Greek neighborhoods, and the resettling process is underway now. Not from so this is a practice that is continuing, that began with the Hoxha regime and is continuing. As you know, Father, the ecumenical patriarch named 4 priests, 4 bishops to go to Albania, and the Albanian government has yet to allow them to enter the country on the spurious reasons that they're not Albanian citizens. Archbishop Yakovos, when he came here as head of the Albanian Church, was not an American citizen. This is unheard of in any civilized country, that people, in order to be a religious leader, you have to be a citizen of that country. The Omonia, which was an elected political party organization, fielded candidates in 1991. They won 5 seats, and the government in Tirana, very alarmed, and passed a law saying no party can have an ethnic basis, and prevented Omonia from fielding candidates. Then this new Human Rights Party was created. But why shouldn't there be an ethnic party? There are ethnic parties in other countries. The education, families are not allowed to teach their children Greek, only up to the 4th grade, and only in certain districts, only 96 towns and villages. Why shouldn't there be private schools that teach Greek if the government doesn't want to have education in the public schools, which is stipulated by the Treaty of the Protocol of Corfu? All these are violations against international human rights standards. And all I'm asking is that Albania apply them to their own people, so that they can speak with a clear conscience when they demand them for Albanians in Serbia. And I think Albanians in Serbia should also have the same rights. But I think...
I want to add to that Omonia was an organization, not a political party. That's why it wasn't allowed to take part in the elections. After that, the Greeks... It was a cultural organization. After that, the Greeks formed their party, the minority, and they were allowed, and they won 2 seats in the parliament.
Thank you. Question here.
Going beyond the Albania-Greek question, because I think this issue is much broader, I want to commend Nick Ashford from MIT. I want to commend Nick, and no one's really picking up on it, the fact that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you fundamentally believe in civil rights and people's rights to call themselves what they want to call themselves, not what somebody else in Athens or Bucharest or anyone else wants to call them, then you're closer to finding the solution we have in this country. We could have been a French America, an English America, Dutch America, if it wasn't a commitment to basic human rights, which may begin with an argument of autonomy, because people don't feel safe to disperse or use a common language until you get that part. There are 4 solutions. We can let the chaos continue. We can begin with autonomy and hope that we find the whole region in the common market in 20 or 30 years where we reintegrate economically without the ethnic boundaries. We can exchange populations like the Greeks and the Turks did, and that may be not a solution that is not a good solution compared to what we are witnessing. Or we can basically insist that all of these countries provide the basic civil rights and mean it, so that autonomy and safe havens are not required. By the way, Nick, if we're going to be open on this issue, we have to argue that the people who call themselves Turks in Thrace also have that right, and recognize that could mean Eastern Thrace elects at some point to become autonomous in a way in which it is not. And I think I understand you recognize that if we're going to be consistent. But I think your solution is the only real long-lasting solution. If we believe in basic human rights, then these historical and strong emotional things, I'm a Greek American, I feel emotional about Greece, but I feel more emotional about preserving the sanctity of individual freedom. And if we don't have that, we have nothing but strife.
I fully agree with you, and as you made no question, I have no answer to give to you. I agree with you totally. I have only to add here that I've been away from my country 8 months, but before that period, I have never heard of any demand by the Greek minority there for autonomy. All these demands for autonomy come from some Greek political circles in Greece, and not from the population, from the Greek population that lives within Albania. So it's to my idea that we must not fall to the game of the politicians.
Now we've got 7 minutes. I want to get a few
totally
very
agree.
short questions.
Totally
No
agree.
more people stand up, please. We won't have time. Yes.
Totally agree with Mr. Kalamata. I'm Bulgarian. I'm a student at Kennedy School of Government. And just some facts. My first girlfriend, Mr. Gage, was Greek. And one of my best friends lately is Albanian, Robert Cheko. So, you know, I think that the solution of this problem is not in these political struggles and territorial claims. My aunt was teacher in chemistry in pure Bulgarian language in Bulgarian school in Ohrid. My father is born in a village which is now in Yugoslavian territory. But Bulgaria has never had any territorial claims. We just have to obey the rules of the game. You know, there are borders and they should be followed. This type of autonomies, I agree with proposition of Mr. Gage, but there are 77 nationalities in Bulgaria and we are 8 million, you know. So let's stop looking in the foreign yards and giving advices what they should do, because otherwise we'll not reach a reasonable end. I would like to ask Mr. Gage, what does he think about the Bulgarian decision to accept Macedonia as a name? And I would like to add that there are a lot of towns in the United States called after names in tens of states in Europe and all over the world, you know, but nobody claims them. And thank you.
Bulgaria was the first country to recognize the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. Immediately after that recognition, Nova Macedonia, the major newspaper in Skopje, which is allied with the party of Mr. Gligorov, wrote an editorial saying that Macedonians should not rejoice at this gesture because it hides the covetous intentions of Bulgaria to absorb the eastern part of the former Republic of Macedonia. So I think it was a rush to judgment because they have certain interests in the region, and and I think it was unfortunate. But even the people in the Republic question the motives, and it is not true. I can produce a number of newspapers, books in which major parties in Bulgaria make claims on territory of other nations in the area.
Let's want to move rather quickly with short answers and give
something.
Yes, quickly.
Yeah, just a few words I like to add to the idea that the only solution I see for that region is to stop dealing with these problems and have our eyes towards a broader ideal which is expressed in the European community, or in the interrelation of European states, which, if it's been seen seriously by the governments, would solve many problems. But it cannot be done with Serb communists or terrorists that are in power now.
Thank you. Question here, comment.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question from Mr. Gage, but I wanted to start with the statement that Greece is a country of thousands of histories, thousand years of history, is not a nation of yesterday. Therefore, arguments, let's forget the history, are really not acceptable. With regard to the region of Macedonia, just in the beginning of this century, the Bulgarian Komitadjis caused a lot of trouble to the Greek nation. Thousands of people have died. Now, why I mention the Bulgarian Komitadjis? Because the Skopjans are related to the Bulgarians, and they are pervaded by the same mentality. Now, I ask Mr. Gage, how come the Europeans and the Americans that know very well the history of Macedonia and the importance of the history of Macedonia for the Greek nation, how come when they know that the Republic of Skopje was a ploy of Tito and Stalin to establish a Slavic state at the expense of Greece, they accept the usurpation by Skopje of Greek symbols, of Greek names, and they allow them to be nominated even temporarily with the misleading name of former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia, when they know that they are usurpers, that they have not honored, that in their constitution still they claim aggressive intentions against Greece. How come? Are they pretending they are stupid, or they have important interests? They have important interests.
Short answer, if you wish to.
I think the answer is that Europeans and Americans do not know history as well as you think.
I think that we cannot solve anything with nationalist patience.
I want to inform the audience from my first-hand experience. I had the lucky or the mislucky to born in northern Epirus. And for 34 years, after 31 years, I visit my family because Albanians didn't let me to communicate, and not only the communists, because it's really difficult to say who are the communists, because for 50 years they have the same propaganda, and they try to brainwash all over the world. Unfortunately, Mr. Kalamata, not the Greek politicians from Greece seeking the autonomies of Northern Epirus. The Northern Epirotans themselves, they are fighting abroad, and even today there in Northern Epirus, and unfortunately the Greek politicians don't pay too much attention. I wish they were interested for the freedom and justice of Northern Epirus. In Himara, I was in Himara 3 times last summer. They are not allowed to write Greek words outside their houses. They are only Greeks. They are not allowed to call themselves today, Mr. Kalamata, with Mr. Berisha. Today they are not allowed to call themselves Greeks in Himara. In Argyrokas, we are fighting for 2 years in a row to open a Greek school. They don't let us to. Why? So if they are not Greeks, why we have to open a school? Who's going to go to the school? By the way, I want to inform you also.
I promise.
In 1 second. I want to inform you also. I was right there on February 12th when they burned all the Greek stores in Ayi Saranda by the Albanians. Thank you.
I think that we will better here concentrate on ideas than discussing small matters.
No, just to close the topic, let me just...
If we go discussing whether Himara, for example, is Albanian or Greek, I don't think we'll land soon, because all the Albanians are convinced that Himarians are Albanians and not Greeks. And the only relation they have ever had with Greeks is the trade relations that they went to Corfu. That's what Albanians say. I don't think you should say, oh, because that's what Albanians say. You say they are Greeks, so we cannot end with these discussions, especially when we are in Balkans.
Thank you. We have a very short, each make a quick short statement. I'll give them each a chance to answer at the end. Take notes, go right through. Very short comment or question.
Yes, I just wanted to say my name is Evangelos Athanasopoulos and I'm Greek. And I don't know what we accept to hear from Mr. Kalamata. Mr. Kalamata is Albanian. He's going to keep saying the same things over and over again. He's not going to change his mind. The Americans that live here. Yes, sir. Yes. The Americans that live here are not going to understand our problems because they've never been invaded, bombarded. Their mothers haven't been executed. So how are they going to understand us? But then they want to intervene. I want to ask Mr. Cage. The Germans, the Albanians, everybody's fighting for their interests. What about Greeks? What is the Greek government doing for the Skopje Republic? What are we doing against them? Diplomacy, yes. We've been talking, we've been negotiating with Albanians, Bulgarians. Since 1922, we've been nothing but negotiating. Okay, diplomacy is okay, but there are two ways for one nation to impose its will upon another. Economic sanctions, and then there's war. It works for everybody else. Why don't we impose economic sanctions against Skopje?
You can take notes if you want. We're going to give you each a minute to sum up at the end. We've already exceeded our time. I was ordered by the Kennedy School to stop at 8:30. It's 8:34. We'll have quick comments, then you'll get a chance to sum up at the end. Yes, please.
I was just going to say that now Mr. Kalamata has the answers to why Greeks in southern Albania or northern Epirus do not ask themselves for autonomy, because they have just too vivid memories. I would like to ask another question, because this theme tonight has to do with U.S. challenges, U.S. policy challenges in the Southern Balkans. So my question is, what are the pros and cons in dealing with a region whose name is so objectionable to Greece? On the downside, in the best interest of the United States, I see creating a very a bad feeling among an ally of many years. And I just can't see the upside of allowing something like this to happen. So I would like to hear your opinion about it.
Thank you. Over here.
Yeah, I would just like to say that I find what's going on really obscene. I think that the intellectual level of discussion tonight is really horrendous. And I think this really, tonight what I'm seeing, the sniggering, the applause, like a boxing match, shows us the danger of nationalism. And when each group comes in and talks about history and symbols, I get very suspicious. And I think that it is this kind of an atmosphere that's not conducive to people living together. And I find it even more obscene that people are indulging in their own victimhood when people in Bosnia are being slaughtered on a mass scale. And here we are. It's not even being mentioned. I'm really appalled.
First of all, I would like to answer also to the lady. The American Constitution and the American country lets people talk about their origin, where they come from. They are American Irish, they are American Italians, they are American anything, and we cannot talk about American Greek Albanians, or we cannot talk about history. What if someone comes and gets the symbols of the United States? Wouldn't you be upset?
No, I'm talking about the use of symbols and history
But
for
the use of
other
symbols and
purposes, for
history,
political purposes.
unfortunately, there is another country that is using the symbols and the history of Greece in order to persecute a new name. We have nothing against the independence of this country. This country can have any name without depicting and getting the symbols and the history of another country. And we can use slides, if you want, that represent the former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia, how they present situations. If you would like to see them, and then make your judgments.
No, I'm afraid we're going to, our time has expired. I'll give each of our speakers 2 minutes to make some final comments. Nicholas.
I think this discussion has been very productive because I think it shows that the complaints and the histories and the injuries and the wounds are so deep in this region that only if human rights are applied equally to all peoples in this region can we avoid the bloodbath that is going on now in northern Yugoslavia. I would like to ask Mr. Kalamata one simple question. Is he prepared to see all the rights that he wants for the Albanians in Kosovo also applied to the people who live in southern Albania, northern Cyprus, you call it wherever you want? What I want to know is, are the rights that you claim that are denied to the people in Kosovo, are you prepared to allow them to the minorities in your own country, not just Greeks, but there are Vlachs and other minorities as well?
Kalamata.
I'm prepared to see every human being of the world have human rights, be it an Albanian, a Greek, a Serb, whatever it be. I'm prepared to see them with equal rights, and that's what's my ideal for the future. But I don't think that you can solve the Yugoslav crisis by inventing another crisis in the southern Albania. I think that the Yugoslav crisis should be solved by other means. Okay.
Thank you both. Let me thank you. We're looking, I won't say we've solved it, but the method for dealing with this is probably better through discourse than the way it's being dealt with in the northern Balkans. We will try to continue these discussions at ARCO Forum and otherwise. Let me thank you for your patience and your kind attention. Join me in thanking our speakers. Good to see you again.